Hello everyone and welcome back to drheather.nd. Today I'm going to be making herbal honey eye drops. And I actually post a lot of different herbal projects and medicine making recipes and such on my Instagram and Facebook. And actually when I posted about these eye drops I got the most comments and questions than I had on anything else. So I figured I would make a video, show anyone who wants to see how to do it, so that anyone who wants to make these at home on their own knows exactly how I do it in case they'd like to model their recipe after mine. So today I'm going to be using calendula and chamomile as the herbs in the eye drops. I like to make sure that any herbs that I'm using in projects like these where this is actually going to be going into the eyes, I want to make sure that I'm using good quality organic herbs. Another commonly used herb that you could add to an herbal eye drop like this would be chrysanthemum, so that's another great herb. But I'm going to just use calendula and chamomile today, so those are the herbs that I'll be using. I'll be using Manuka honey. Other items that you'll need for this project, you need water that you'll put into a pot so that you can heat it. It's almost like making tea, so you'll need basically what you need to make tea. You'll need some sort of a clean, dry glass container that you can pour the tea into once it's done and add the honey to, so where you're mixing the eye drops together in. You'll need something to strain the tea with before you add the honey, and we're going to go through step by step how we do each one of these things, but I just wanted to show you what you'll need from the outset. So I like to use, these are unbleached natural tea bags. It's what I make my herbal teas in for drinking. I like to use that because you really want something that is going to strain the herbs out really finely, especially because we're using something like chamomile. If you've ever used chamomile, you know that there's tiny little pieces in there and you really want to strain that out well before you're putting those into your eyes. So you want something that's going to strain the tea very finely, but also that's not going to add anything toxic to the solution, because then of course you'll be pouring it in or dropping it into your eyes. So these are the ingredients that we'll need. I'm going to take you through, as I said, step by step, and we will make these eye drops. The first step is to add your herbs to your pot. So as you can see, I covered just about the bottom of the pot with these herbs. I'm not going to add that much water. I'll show you how much I add once I get it on the stove, but I like my herbal mixture to be very concentrated because I really want those properties of the calendula and chamomile to remain in the eye drops once I'm done making them. So today I'm aiming for filling 2 1-ounce glass bottles full. It's almost impossible to make just this much tea unless you have a really small pot. So you'll usually have, even if you're just filling it with herbs to cover the bottom, you'll usually have some extra tea left over. What you could do with this tea is you could use it as a skin or hair wash. If you want to, if someone in your family is having eye problems at the moment, you could also use the leftover tea as an eye wash in itself, or a compress. I'm going to speak a little bit at the end about using these eye drops and their longevity, but something that's important to know is that if you're not adding the honey, which we will be at the end to make our eye drops, then if you have just the tea alone after making this, it won't last long. So if you put it in the fridge, maximum I'd use it for a day or two, especially if you're going to be using it in the eyes. And you'll see after that that the tea won't be very good anymore. So just make sure that if you're keeping the extra tea around, that you're using it quickly. Next step is going to be to add the water and get it cooking, so I'll show you what that looks like next. I just added the water to the pot and put it over the heat. Like I said in the last segment, we have a high herb to water ratio. So you can see there's not very much water in here at all. Pretty much just enough to cover the herbs, and since these herbs, especially the calendula, are a little bit fluffy, they do absorb a lot of the water. So you can already see that starting to happen. That's okay, because at the end we will really put some pressure on those herbs and squeeze as much of the infused water out as we can so that we really get those herbal properties in our final infusion. But we're going to keep this on the heat until it boils. We'll let it boil for about 2 minutes and then we'll remove from the heat. Just a note on the boiling step. This is a very important step because we will be adding these drops to the eyes, so we want to make sure that no microbes that might have been in the water at the beginning remain. So that's why I advise to boil for about 2 minutes. Also, talking about the materials that we're using, I mentioned it with our measuring cup here or whatever container you'll be using to mix the eye drops in. I didn't mention it with the eye drops or the eyedropper bottles. You just want to make sure that all your materials are clean and dry. And dry is important because any water that might be in those bottles, let's say you had a couple drops of water from washing left over when you poured in your eye drop solution, if there are any microbes in that water that was left in the bottle, then there's a chance that they will possibly infect the eye. And so you want to make sure that your materials that you're using after the boiling step are all, again, clean and dry. Even an extra note on making these bottles ready to pour the eye drops into. What I do when I wash these out, because a lot of times I have these eye drops going in the household and they are going indefinitely, but they don't last indefinitely. And so usually I have about a day or two span where we don't have eye drops available, and that's because I've cleaned out the bottles and I'm letting them thoroughly dry. And I like to pick a sunny day to do this, so I will wash out the bottles and the droppers. And then I will bring the bottles outside in the sunlight for at least a few hours and let them totally dry. The UV light also has antimicrobial properties, so it's not only drying the water within the bottles and the droppers, but it's also helping kill any microbes that might be in there. After the infusion finished boiling, I removed it from the heat and let it sit for a few minutes. I just like to let it cool slightly, not so much that the Manuka honey will no longer melt in it. So now is the straining step, and I'm going to show you how I strain. Again, you can use whatever sort of straining method you like or you have on hand. Just remember that you want it to be very finely strained, and you want to use something that's not going to introduce anything toxic into your final product. And so I'm going to do this for a couple of minutes till I really get all of the liquid out. I'm also going to use a spoon and really press down on those herbs that are in the bottom of the pot and get all of the good infused herbal water out. Since you couldn't see the herbs that I was talking about in the bottom of the pot in the last segment, I just wanted to show you what that looks like. Once I get toward the end of my straining, I usually push all the herbs to one side of the pot and really try to squeeze out as much of that good infused water as I can, because the last bit of this is really the most concentrated part of the infusion. So once I push all of this extra infusion out of the herbs, I'll strain it into the rest of the mixture. This is our strained herbal infusion. We have just about enough here to fill these 2 amber bottles part way, which is just about the amount we wanted. Again, if you made extra, you can use it as a hair or skin rinse, or you can use it as an eye wash or a compress for around the eyes. I've already composted the herbs that we use to make the infusion. It just doesn't feel right to me to put them in the garbage. I encourage you to do the same with your leftover herbal material. Our next step is to add the Manuka honey. The more Manuka honey that you add, the stronger the antimicrobial effect will be, because the antimicrobial effect does come largely from the honey. However, the herbs do have these properties as well. But also something to note is that the more honey you add, the more these eye drops will sting when you apply them. And it's fine, honey is healthy and safe for the eyes, but it will be a little bit more uncomfortable the more honey you add. Also, the more honey you add, the more of a shelf life you have, because honey in itself is a preservative. I like to add about a 1-to-3 ratio of honey to infusion. Something else that I like to do when I'm trying to figure out exactly how much honey I want in a particular batch is, if I'm using the drops or if someone else is using the drops, I'll have them put a drop into their eye and let me know how it feels in terms of the sting factor. And if they can handle a little bit more sting and they want more of that honey property, then we will add a little bit more Manuka honey. If you've overdone it with the honey already, there's not much more that you can do other than make more infusion and add more infusion. So if you're not sure how much Manuka honey you want to add, start on the lower side, drop some into your eyes and see how it feels. And if you'd like more Manuka honey, you can always add more. So you add the honey and then you stir to dissolve. If your infusion is still warm, then of course you'll be able to dissolve the honey much quicker. But don't do this step until your infusion has cooled at least somewhat. And that's because you don't want a very hot infusion to ruin the properties of the honey. Once your Manuka honey is totally dissolved in your infusion and you have it at the concentration that you like, your next and final step is to pour the eye drops into your dropper bottles. So I always have 2 dropper bottles going, and that's because I have 2 members of the family who we're using these eye drops for. Always make sure that if there's more than one person using the eye drops, that you're labeling them. As with any eye drops, you don't want to touch the dropper tip directly to your eye. So drop from a little bit of a distance. That way you're not potentially getting any microbes from your eye area onto the dropper bottle and then introducing them into your actual eye drop solution. While these eye drops can sting on initial application, they're overall very soothing to the eyes. They're also anti-microbial and anti-inflammatory. The way that I like to use these eye drops is 1 to 3 drops in the affected eye. If both eyes are affected, you can use them in both eyes. About 3 times a day, but it's really as needed. You can't really overdo it with these eye drops. I store them in the fridge. Remember that the more Manuka honey you have in them, the longer that they'll last. With the 1 to 3 honey to infusion ratio that I typically use, these will last in the fridge for about 2 weeks. But if you notice that they start to look cloudy or they start to smell off, then you'll know that the infusion and the eye drops have gone bad and you'll want to start with a new batch. Remember, like I said, if you want to continue using them for more than the 1 to 2 week shelf life, then you'll want to remake it, and in between batches you want to wash and dry thoroughly these dropper bottles. So as usual, this is not medical advice because I am not your doctor, so I can't advise exactly what will work for you and what you should use, but this is how we use these eye drops here. If you have any questions about how to make them, how to use them, let me know. You can comment below and I'm happy to respond. Hope this was helpful and informative to you. Have a great day. We'll see you next time on Dr. Heather ND.